Hi there, Drew Murray here with D20 Advice again. You may notice, same shirt, so this was recorded on the same day as the last one, but editing and stuff and the other videos, that's why this one's not on the same day. So, yeah. I wanted to talk a little bit about something that I've seen come up a few times on different forums, in conversations, and now on the Facebook group for the Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. What Dungeons & Dragons is, how it is as a game. It's a game. It's a role-playing game. It's one of the first role-playing games. One of the first, possibly the first commercially released role-playing game sold in shops. But definitely not the first ever. But it's the first one to codify the mechanics and release them commercially and for it to be successful. So, Dungeons & Dragons is like our base model. Lots of role-playing games go in slightly different directions, but they're all pretty much the same at their core. You have some way of resolving issues, resolving actions that characters take. And that's essentially it. Apart from that, the rest is storytelling. It's imagination. It's all set up beforehand and reinforced throughout the game. Now, there's a lot of stuff in what I've just said to unpack. Let's see how quickly I can do it. So, excuse me. I was looking for a drink there, and I don't have one readily available. So this will be quick because it's dry in here. So, starting with the setup, you need to establish very early on with your players, with everyone involved, what the game is going to be like. The best thing that I can think of right now is genres, film genres, book genres, that sort of thing, to try and establish a baseline for what people should be expecting. So use a film as an example, a book as an example, a piece of music as an example for how people should generally feel about this, how their characters should generally feel and act. If you say, I want a Guardians of the Galaxy fun romp in space, then that's the tone sort of set. People can make the occasional in-game joke and quip, maybe the occasional meta reference, so long as it doesn't completely break everyone out of the immersion. But apart from that, it's going to have a relatively serious story, a relatively serious tone underpinned by this comedy, but that a few elements will just be ridiculous, but meant to be taken seriously because of the threat they pose. Like a giant tree, a walking tree. But because it's underpinned by this general science fiction, it's an alien, then it's allowed a degree of seriousness. Because there's a seriousness to the general tone, that comedic aspect can be given a serious underpinning. You could take that tree seriously, especially during particular moments. Something that I learned in my acting school as well, that I take very seriously into my role-playing, is the idea of beats moments, but only to a certain degree, because Stanislavski was a bit of a nutter. But the idea that what the audience experiences, so what all your players and the Dungeon Master will experience when you're playing role-playing games, is bits. You could describe your character basically. You could have your character behave in a certain way for a certain amount of time, but then one particular thing changes it. You've got a barbarian. He goes around killing goblins, barely talking to anyone. Everyone just gets this idea in their head of like the big, gruff, silent type, and that he's violent. The moment you introduce a small, weak creature that's not evidently violent or harmful towards the group, you have that barbarian look after that creature. You get the kitten down out the tree, don't say anything. That modifies how that character is viewed from that point onwards. That becomes a defining characteristic of the character, no matter how long transpires between that single act and when people are thinking about it. That could have been in the first session, and everyone will treat that character differently because it's a characteristic now. It's something that was different about the character. It wasn't just a one-note character thing. But something else that can inform a character is to make them that one-note thing. They only do this. They ignore everything else. They ignore the kitten in the tree. They ignore the helpless villagers. That helps inform who the character is, how the character should behave. This is starting to lead into the opposite of this, where people don't role play, because that's good role playing. Now the whole setup, get a good genre kind of in there, that's great. You need to maintain that throughout. And so if you want characters to behave a certain way, kind of describe what kind of characters you want in the game if you're dungeon mastering, or if you're a player, you have preferences too, the kind of people that you want to play with. You might not want silly names, you might want silly names. Discuss this. This is why the idea of a session 0 appeals to me, although I've very rarely had a session 0. I've had a session 1 where we all sit around, make our characters, some discussion takes place, but then we just start. But because we've always been friends, we've all kind of had similar interests. We all liked Lord of the Rings, we all liked Star Trek and Star Wars, so whenever we did D&D but with a Star Wars storyline, we all enjoyed it, we all took it seriously, it was nice and fun. But a lot of people play with people that aren't necessarily the friends beforehand. They're playing with people that they might not necessarily know. A lot of people are playing online, so there's not a lot of the usual social interaction, body cues and things to kind of get to know someone and relax a bit. People are always going to be tense as well when they're meeting new people and interacting with new people. So when you're playing online, you're going to have this situation where you're not as relaxed as you think you are. So you're not going to enjoy things as much as you might do with friends. Also, when you're with friends, you forgive a lot more because they're your friends. You've got time and emotions invested in them. You will forgive a lot more of their foibles. So try to be less harsh on people that you don't know. If they're doing something silly, just think, would you have let that go if that was a mate of yours? You might have done. You probably would have done. So just try and relax a bit more. Take a few deep breaths, like I should do. So, other people don't play the game as a role-playing game. They play it as a tactical, strategic warband game. Not quite Warhammer scale, but more kind of like Mordheim scale. And that's fine. There are game mechanics, combat mechanics definitely allow that to occur as like a mini game within it, almost like a separate thing, but compatible, so you can have this going on and you can still add role-playing spins to it. You can go outside of the standardized mechanics and say, right, well, I'm going to scramble up this hillside here and give out an owl call, see how they react. You don't need to stick to prescribed powers and abilities. You can say and do anything, which could then trigger certain bonuses and penalties, which is why the mechanics are fairly broad. If you want a strategic combat game, I'd recommend something like Mage Knight, Hero Clicks, something like that, or a smaller scale version of something like Warhammer. Also, what might be of interest to you, if you want a little bit of the role-playing on the side as possibly an optional extra, or just story to surround and wrap around your combats, is something like Hero Quest, or what's the other one? Talisman's a good game anyway, but not Talisman. What's the one that I played quite a bit of? Can't recall. I'll stick it in the description, but it's one where you've got kind of like Talisman style and Hero Quest style characters. You can buy equipment, you get equipment as monsters and things. Descent, that's it. Descent is the name of the game. So play something like that if the combat and strategy is all you're interested in. I would recommend anyway. You can, if you're fine getting your combat kicks and then retreating to the background or getting involved in the roleplay in the meantime, then fantastic. Dungeons & Dragons is the game for you. And I'm not saying don't play Dungeons & Dragons if your entire group is fine with just running the combat from Dungeons & Dragons, because it's a decent system. But I'm saying that if you're as part of a group that isn't necessarily all on the same page, then you might need to consider other options for everyone's enjoyment, because you might enjoy playing that game with other people and might not know other people that want to play that game, but dragging people into the game that you're wanting to play when they all got there thinking that we're going to be playing something else, you're limiting their enjoyment a great deal, and you'll be limiting your own enjoyment as well, because you'll notice people starting to roll their eyes, be overly polite, just like, oh, okay, we'll do it this way, just now. Or you'll get like actual backlash. You'll get people shouting at you and stuff, which isn't good. Don't shout at people if they're playing a type of game that you don't want to play. Communicate clearly. Talk to your GM. Talk to them outside of the game. So yeah, people have different ideas of what the game is and varying levels of the game and how balanced it needs to be. Clerics are extremely underpowered in a game that does not have any undead, any extraplanar beings at all. Let's say you're playing a game with just humans, no other types at all. The ranger also becomes fairly crap with the whole like favoured enemy thing. Let's say you're doing the whole campaign in a single city, no different terrains, so again, ranger pretty shitty. The game is balanced overall on like a wide perspective, that broadly speaking, if you stuck every monster in a room with every variation of a player character in as balanced as you could get it, so I don't know, like a Trask with a limp, then yeah, there would be a way so that with the randomization of the dice rolls, it would probably be 50-50 or a slight advantage to the heroes, so that statistically they would win more often or an equal amount, using all of their abilities and bring them all to bear. But that's not going to be every game. That's not going to be your game. Your game is your game. I am a big fan of homebrewing, is what people are calling it a lot online. I just call it doing something else. I don't really have a name for it. I just create my own races, create my own classes by modifying other ones. I read the rule books. I read help guides on how to modify these things to try and maintain a certain amount of game balance, because I like rule sets and I like things matching and fitting in. But that's my preference. You could just make up whatever you want. You could change the clerics, so instead of turning undead, they turn people of another nation, because you're basically, instead of holding up a holy symbol, it could be a holy symbol that they're repulsed by and want to run away from, or it could be the decapitated head of their leader. The same effect would happen. Because you don't have a morale system in 5th edition like you do in 2nd edition, I'd say turning is the closest you're going to get to that, especially for turning. Destroying, rebuking, that's a different kettle of fish, but that again is like an echelon above in that set of mechanics. So you could alter what happens there. You could have them be destroyed in a mechanical sense, in that the mines are just gone, they are quivering messes on the floor, but they're not physically destroyed. You could do all sorts of things so that it seems similar to what the rules were getting at. And to me, it's fairly simple because I've got a lot of experience with doing this sort of thing. And I've seen a lot of people as well say, oh, it's dead easy, you're stupid for not being able to do this. Don't say that, that's mean. But also, they're not stupid, they're just inexperienced. Or they just don't have an interest in doing that sort of thing, they just want to get in and have their fun. Someone on the Facebook group thing wanted an aquatic god, like a Poseidon type character, to be a patron for their warlock, which is a fantastic idea. I would just modify what the Archfey gives them, because the Greek gods, especially like Poseidon, were very capricious. They're very much like the Fae are portrayed in Dungeons & Dragons, at least in the warlock sections. So I would use that as my baseline, and I would just alter the abilities to be more aquatic. I'd look to the Elemental Evil campaign handbook. I would also just look at spells and just modify them. I'd change the element type, I would change what they're affecting, what the flavor text is, to try and make it fit more. Experience with Mutants and Masterminds helps in this regard, because a lot of the time you're dealing with the bare bones mechanics to create a character, and then you add on the description over the top. And you add descriptors to allow other powers to interact with that power in a particular way. And that's essentially how all abilities work in games like this. Mutants and Masterminds is just a nice little peek under the hood, while still allowing it to be a playable game system in and of itself, which is awesome. So, bringing this to a close, you're all wrong in how you're playing the game, but also you're all right in how you're playing the game. You are playing the game in a particular way. It may not be the way that you think is best, it may be the way that you think everyone else wants to play it. Basically, communication is key. Have patience. Play a style of game that you don't want to play. If you don't want to play horror because you are too focused on cracking jokes and you think having a good time requires you to be happy, like actually happy all the time, then by all means, go and find that sort of thing, but horror's good. People watch horror films for a wide variety of reasons. Some people like to be scared, some people react in a very human way of laughing in the face of fear and danger. It's a normal human response, it's a way that you psychologically get your brain out of the situation. There was a thing where people were asked to press a button in a lab, and whenever they pressed a button, they were told that they were electrocuting someone else and they could hear the screams. Some people laughed because that's all they could do to kind of separate themselves from the situation and almost make themselves convinced that the situation was absurd, so that they could psychologically cope with the fact that they are pushing a button and electrocuting someone. They weren't electrocuting someone, they just pressed a button, were told it was electrocuting someone, and they heard a scream. So they thought they were doing real harm. So actually being scared, you can be tempted to shut that off and be really funny. But just be aware that can break the immersion for some other people. So if that's not the kind of game that you're good with, then play a different type of game. Mention that to the players. Maybe you could be the comedic relief in that horror setting if you're the only one doing it and you try to temper yourself. But if you want to do like full-on Scooby-Doo, it's a funny horror setting, so you've got the horror draperies and the horror characters, but the situation, the tone is just absurdist, then go ahead, do that. It's your game. You could play Tomb of Horrors in that way. Modules are terrible now that I've started playing them. They're good for giving you ideas. They are good frameworks. They are not adventures. They are not games of Dungeons and Dragons. They are not giving you the tone to hit. They are not giving you the way to play it, which is good. I don't think I'd enjoy them so much if they did, but I was expecting that sort of thing, so I was reticent to get involved with modules. Now that I have tried them, I see that they're not as much as I thought they were, so you're still bringing a lot to it. If you played a module before and you're getting ready to play it again, you could play it a completely different way. With one module and one set of core rulebooks, you could play for a lifetime. It's such an awesome game where anything can happen. And that's the thing that I really wanted to impress in this video, is that anything can happen and that doesn't break the game. You could have a first level character with a completely tame red dragon mount that's an ancient worm. Does that break the game balance? I don't know. Does it break the game balance? What are the enemies like? If by having that red dragon mount, you can then get into aerial battles against other dragons, but the people are still squishy on top, so you're relying on the mounted combat mechanics and the control of the dragon, which will just improve over time. Do that then. Just do it. First level, dragon mount. Do it. I remember one time where I was running a campaign and I had a bunch of little dragon babies running around, like second level characters. And yeah, you can have dragon babies running around for first and second level characters. That's fine. The challenge rating matches. Had a few of them. They were burning down the city. One of them stabbed the dragon with a knife. I was kind of rereading the boons section like a couple of hours before, and I really loved the idea of like these boons in the Dungeon Master's Guide. So just like little magical twists that you can give to people after they've reached level 20. And I thought, no, I'm bringing that in now. So dragon blood in my game gave weapons magical powers. However you kill the dragon, if you dipped a weapon in dragon blood, magical powers. And that knife then got magical powers. It's not an in-canon thing. That's not what happens to it. I've since found out afterwards as well that to create half dragons, there is a ritual involving dragon's blood. So there is precedent for it, but I didn't know that at the time. You can make up anything. The Dungeons and Dragons movie. Doesn't matter what you think about it. It got me into Dungeons and Dragons in the first place because I got the DVD, watched it, I enjoyed it because I was a kid. I was like 12 or something, 11, and I watched the DVD extras explaining that this was a game. But yeah, anyway, I'll get into that in another video. So yeah, I've spoken very quickly and I apologize if it was difficult to understand, but basically if anyone is complaining, swearing, shouting that you're playing the game wrong, then they're playing the game wrong. Playing the game correctly is everyone having an enjoyable time. You don't need to be happy all the time, you don't need to be joking all the time, you don't need to be serious all the time. But if you want to, you can have the same tone throughout. But if at any point communication hasn't occurred to the point where people aren't sure how they should be acting, that's a failure on your part. It's a failure of Western civilization for losing the etiquette system. But still, talk to each other. Tell each other what you want ahead of time. I know it's really romantic, this idea of you just having this idea in your head and then it just happening out there, and you just get that rush. You're just like, yes, this is just how I imagined it. That's less likely to happen if you don't communicate it first. I know it sounds weird. It's like, I want to have this amazing thing where I somersault off a mountaintop and land on a dragon and we dive bomb and bite the head off a giant and fly off. And when it happens, it might not feel as good, but it'll still feel good. That's still awesome. It's still epic, and it'll impress everyone else. Just the idea of that visual. If you've got something in your head, and the feeling of entertaining everyone else at that table with this amazing thing that you've wanted to have happen and it happened, or it attempted to happen and then it failed in a spectacular way and good descriptions are going on, everyone's going to have a good time. You're going to feel good for entertaining everyone else. Everyone is there to entertain everyone else and yourself. Whew. That's going to be the end of this video because it's gone on for 20 minutes and that's ridiculous. So I hope you all had some experience from this video. Give yourselves 10 experience points. Ding! Go and play. Just play, but talk to each other. Communicate. Tell each other what you want. Practice safe gaming. So, yeah, cool. Bye. Go.